Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Susan Basterfield in Auckland, New Zealand. Thank you very much for joining the webinar at an unusual time. I really appreciate everybody making the effort to come and join us today. I'm very excited to be presenting on the topic of participatory organizing, not only because I have the privilege of working in an organization that is participatory, but because I have had the pleasure of coming to India twice this year to work with a manufacturing company, a paper manufacturing company in Faizabad, Uttar Pradesh, who are also working towards becoming more participatory. So thank you very much, and let's get on with the show. So, excuse me. Here we go. So who am I? I'm Susan Basterfield. I'm a catalyst and convener, and the story about me getting the name catalyst is quite interesting. I have had the privilege of working with young people on conservation projects, and one evening late into the night while the students were working on a project, one of the young men turned to me and said, "Mrs. Basterfield, you're a catalyst. You just sit in the room and something changes." And I kind of liked that, so I've taken on that moniker, and it seems to fit. And I'm a convener, I am a facilitator, and I'm a space holder, but I'm also a scrum master, a coach, and a facilitator. And I believe very strongly in experiments, even over methods, and this is some of the language that we'll be talking about throughout this webinar. I also believe in scaffolds over frameworks, and I just noticed a typo there, not frameworks. And the way that I like to visualize this metaphor is that if you think about framing a house, you put up the wooden frame, but as soon as you start to put the bricks and the mortar and the plaster and the paint, the only way that you can change the structure is by tearing it down and starting again. That's why I much prefer the metaphor for organizations of scaffolds, and that we as leaders are scaffold tenders. Our job and our responsibility is to make sure that everybody that's on the scaffold working on what's emerging within has the right tools. So let's make sure that the people who need saws have saws and hammers and paintbrushes. We might make cups of chai and make sure that the scaffold is nice and tight. And what this allows is for the unique manifestation of whatever can only be created by the individuals who are working on the organization to emerge. Just sit with that for a second and consider that metaphor. I haven't always been in the position to spend time thinking about things like metaphors because I spent over 25 years in senior leadership positions in multinational organizations like IBM and British Petroleum and Hewlett-Packard and Telstra and Vodafone. And I was at that point, I guess, what didn't have the definition then, but now is known as an intrapreneur. So I was always the leader inside the organization that was trying to do things differently. Seeing and having the privilege of having worked with some great leaders in a startup in the first dot-com boom that was eventually acquired by EDS and then by HP, with the sense of possibility of what can happen if everybody is enabled to do their best and everyone is enabled to participate. And we all know what that can look like in big organizations. Once you start to threaten the hierarchy, once you start to threaten the structures that have been in place for years and decades and sometimes even centuries, the leaders in those positions sometimes get nervous. They get fearful. They wonder why they should change, because of course they have got to their positions by following the rules and doing exactly what was expected of them to get up that ladder. But for some of us, and I hope that for everybody on this call, we sense the possibility of what it's like to be servant leaders and what we can manifest for the organization, for ourselves and for our teams, when we choose to be in leadership from a position of service. And more than anything, I survived. I survived this 25 years, have popped out the other side, and am now really doing the work that I love, helping organizations start to experiment with what it could look like if decision-making was distributed to the edges, if everybody had a voice, if everybody could participate to the level of their desire. What could that look like? So the current experiments that I'm involved in, I'm a foundation catalyst, and yes, that catalyst phrase was in the role description, even without them knowing of my story about the young man naming me a catalyst. So I'm a foundation catalyst at Enspiral, and we'll talk a bit about what that means later on in the webinar. I'm a facilitator of open participatory organizations. I'm a convener and holder of open space. And I coach CEOs and founders and their teams to enable responsiveness and agility without command and control or coercion. So over the next hour, we're going to do a few things. So we'll do a little bit of context setting. I'm going to share with you 2 scaffolds that are commonly available, no IP associated, that you can take away and start experimenting with in your organizations as soon as we get off the call today. The first of those is liberating structures, and the second is sociocracy 3.0. And then I'm going to spend the last part of our time together talking and sharing my lived experience of being in Enspiral, which is actually a living experiment of a self-organized network, and sharing lessons from the open participatory network. So the context of this is pretty simple, right? We're in a VUCA world, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. I think that for better or for worse, many of us might remember where we were at this time and place during this momentous and, in my personal opinion, really frightening change that's happening in the US in the elections. So the reality of a world that might actually from today be increasing in volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I would add an E at the end. And I take this from a positive perspective. E for me means emergent. Why are organizations looking for alternative architectures? I'm pretty sure that most people on this webinar are part of an agile company, and perhaps agile companies that are wanting to scale without losing agility. Larger centralized companies, and I would put into this context even decentralized companies who are wanting to become more agile and more responsive, to trim the management bureaucratic overhead, to distribute decision making for faster and smarter execution, to become more innovative and responsive and resilient to disruption. And my good friend Benita Roy, who I highly recommend you reading her work and her blogs, puts it this way: hierarchical and bureaucratic organizations want to attract the best young talent by creating working conditions that appeal to them. And I love this noticing, because I think that we all know that the days of benefits or value add, or even the table stakes being maybe a ping pong table or a pool table or drinks on a Friday afternoon are not enough anymore. Young people today, talented young people, are going to be looking for organizations that respect their need for autonomy and agency, and that will commit to the ongoing cognitive development that they so value. Learning and development teams are going to have to move away from the learning development portfolio for the year being something that's set in stone, that caters to the capability ladder for certain job descriptions. This isn't going to be enough anymore. Young talent is going to have choices. They already do. You know, the patterns of the way that they hold their work is completely different from the generations past, in which we got into an organization after university and pretty much were prepared to stay there for our entire careers. It's changed tremendously, and the only way that companies are going to be able to really leverage the best of the new talent is to provide them those deliberately developmental opportunities for learning and growth in the organization. And in order to do that, the individuals are going to have to feel like there's opportunities for them to participate. Even companies like Google are looking at this and have published their 5 keys to a successful Google team. And I find it really interesting that the first one is psychological safety. You know, for many of us, this is probably the biggest barrier that we have to cross. In cultures as individuals that have been institutionalized, even thinking about saying what we really feel is frightening beyond imagination. Taking a risk that we might fail, is something that we are just simply not used to. So for a team to create an environment where everybody feels psychologically safe enough to share from their heart without feeling insecure or embarrassed is one of the biggest challenges that I believe that we have as leaders and participants in organizations. The second metric is dependability. You know, this is a big shift from working to please the boss. What this says is that we work together as a team, and we need to be able to depend on each other to do what we say we're going to do and produce quality work. And again, this is a wonderful manifestation of the agile way of working, because we do work in teams and we have to count on each other. Structure and clarity. This is an age-old problem when the senior leadership go away to a swanky resort for a weekend, create the organization's mission, vision, and goals, and maybe objectives for the year, come back, talk to their next layer down managers, who are expected to talk to the next layer down managers, who are expected to somehow, in a clear and unambiguous way, disseminate the goals of the organization. I've never seen it work well. Maybe some of you have been lucky and that you've worked for organizations that do this really well. What this research shows is that we need to do this at a team level, and we need to execute at a team level. Meaning in work is the next. I'm privileged enough now to be able to say without hesitation that the work that I do brings me joy. But I also realize that that's a privilege. Not everybody can have that. We all need to create and earn a livelihood for our families. But if we're doing work that's meaningful to us and personally important to each of us, the chances of us being in a successful team are incrementally higher. And then lastly, the impact of our work. Do we fundamentally believe that the work we're doing matters? I'm going to say that again. Do we fundamentally believe that the work that we're doing matters? It's an interesting question to consider. So that's the context. As I mentioned, we'll go through 2 free scaffolds that are available to you under the Creative Commons license that you can use to boost agility and adaptability at a team or organizational level in your organizations. I'm going to take you through the Enspiral network example. And before we start digging into the meat of the content, just wanted to share with you my principles. My first principle is that all change is voluntary. All opportunities must be opt-in. Coercion has no place for us as one another, as human beings with each other, let alone in the organizations that we work in. The next one is probably a little bit more controversial. I don't believe that there's any such thing as intellectual property when it comes to patterns, ideas, and microstructures. And I also believe really strongly that whatever we do with our experiments, we should be sharing freely. We should be building communities that are based on the practice of our lived experience and our shared experiments. And I honestly believe that there should be no need for experts or accreditation to enable participation. So the first opportunity I'd like to share with you is a wonderful set of 33 tools to enable participation in organizations called Liberating Structures. Co-developed by 2 amazing guys, Keith McCandless and Henri Lipmanowitz. And these are 33 microstructures that we can use to replace or complement conventional practices like scaffolds for emergent strategies. Simple things that we do every day: presentations, status reports, managed discussions, to open discussions and brainstorms. The principles of liberating structures are simple but profound. So to include and unleash everybody, to practice a deep respect for the people and the solutions that can be produced at a local level. Having that growth mindset that allows you to build trust as you go and to be okay with failing. Be okay with failing forward and learning from these loops of iteration in our learning and the opportunities that we're taking with each other to fail forward. Practicing self-discovery within a group, amplifying freedom and responsibility, emphasizing the possibility and suspending your disbelief to the extent that you are going to just trust and be able to believe before you see. To invite creative destruction to enable innovation. Engaging in a serious and playful curiosity. And that's interesting. Did we just lose the screen? Sorry about that. I just lost the screen on mine. It timed out. I apologize. So to engage in seriously playful curiosity, but always start with a clear purpose. And the design elements of the microstructures are quite simple. Make an invitation. Don't coerce. Don't be upset if not everybody turns up. Make the invitation. Distribute the participation amongst the individuals that turn up. Configure the groups in a space that's specifically arranged to enable the process, and sequence and allocate the time. Why do they work? They work because they're simple. They reflect one of the principles that I shared before. They're expertless. A beginner can succeed after the first experience. And they're self-spreading. They're easy to copy without formal training. They're adaptable. They spread with fidelity and adapt to the local conditions. They're inclusive. They include everyone. They work at multiple scales. They're rapid cycling, innovative, and results focused. And why are they different? If we think about what I'm doing now, the presentation, right? The lower left-hand corner, I've got complete control over this, and I'm one person. Diametrically opposed are the liberating structures, where everybody is included in shaping what's happening, and the control is completely distributed. It's interesting to notice where the other things that we do regularly sit on this particular model. I mean, even brainstorming, it's one person at a time sharing thoughts. Open discussions might be a little bit more distributed, but you're getting one voice at a time, not truly participatory. This is the full Liberating Structures menu. Don't worry, I'm not going to take you through them, only to say that they're all on the website with very detailed instructions for what each of them do and how to use each of them. And I just wanted to give an example of how I facilitated a leadership retreat in UP a couple of weeks ago utilizing Liberating Structures. Some of the things that I did, and I'd invite you to consider while I'm going through these, to think about the last time that you were at an away day or an opportunity to spend time with team members to try to build some convergence and some cohesion if these particular objectives were met. So with a structure called 1-2-4-all, we're able to engage everyone simultaneously in generating questions, ideas, and suggestions. TRIZ is one of these techniques that actually destroy in order to build up. So they actually stop the counterproductive activities and behaviors that are happening in your organization at the minute and find ways to make space for innovation and actually to stop those practices. The 15% solution that pops out of that is really focused on the individual. Discover and focus what each person has the freedom and resources to do right now to make the change, to change something, to innovate something, to create something. Technique called Troika Consulting, which allows in groups of 3 to get practical and imaginative help from colleagues literally instantaneously. The whole process takes less than 20 minutes. Heard, Seen, Respected, which gives you the opportunity to really practice deeper listening and empathy with colleagues. You know, these don't take long. You know, in 20 minutes, you can have an experience which will, in the best case, allow you to see something about your colleague, develop a level of empathy and understanding about their circumstance or their gifts or their needs that you've never seen before. And of course, open space. You know, all of us that were at the Scrum Alliance meeting in Bangalore in June had the experience of open space and how it liberates that action and leadership in a group of any size. So out of the 33, these were the 6 that we used, and the great thing about LS is that you can build strings in any shape or form, and there's lots of places that you can go to get help and suggestions to do that. including the website. So everything is free to learn and see and practice via the website. There are regular workshops, and again, the one that's coming up soonest, anybody can get to, is in Portugal. The Agile Connect conference is having a session workshop on liberating structures. There are user groups springing up all over the world, and we're actually, some of us that are in the Slack group are thinking about how we might build a virtual user group community. So stand by for that and get yourself on the list at the website if you're interested. And there's also a book, Liberating Structures, the book, if you want something practical and tactile to hold in your hand. But I think the website's actually better. So there you go. I don't think that Keith or Henri would like me saying that, but that's how I feel. So that's Liberating Structures. The next Creative Commons set of opportunities I'd like to share with you is Sociocracy 3.0. Don't know how many of you are familiar with this work. I would imagine that at least some number of you are familiar with Holacracy, but I'd like to share Sociocracy as an open source and more open participatory experiment that is specifically useful in agile organizations. So like Liberating Structure, Sociocracy 3 is a framework, that's their language, not mine. I would say a scaffold of patterns for collaboration, for doing things like making and evolving agreements, coordinating work, holding effective meetings, building your organizations, getting alignment, and navigating. And it's got influences in history all the way back to Comte's work on the scientific method and what it looks like in democracy, to the Quaker Circle meeting practices, through to the cybernetics and engineering work of Endenburg in 1970, through to our friend Mr. Brian Robertson in Holacracy. And the Sociocracy 3.0 movement really has started to gain steam from 2015. And these patterns are based on 7 principles as well. So consent as opposed to consensus, equivalence in terms of the equal value of everyone's voice, accountability, which is the idea that when we stand up and name what we're responsible for and accountable for, the likelihood of that accountability being followed through is much, much higher than if we're given it in a job description and told to be accountable for something. Continuous improvement, of course, transparency, effectiveness, and empiricism. So we're talking about always experimenting and learning and using data and really logically thinking about what we're doing and learning as we go. And so how might you use Sociocracy 3.0 to extend Agile? Well, we already know what Agile brings to organizations. And if we think of an organization as sort of people that get together to collaborate, and then there's a set of agreements around the collaboration that are sort of our rules of engagement and how we are with each other, all encompassed with the values of us as individuals and the corporate culture. Agile teams do this already, so they cut a nice little slice through this overall picture of an organization. So the question is, and the question that I continually am curious about is, why are more organizations not extending the goodness of Agile and Scrum methodology to the rest of the organization? Sociocracy 3.0 can help this, because everything is based on agreements. So the agreements about how we are with each other, the agreements about how we make decisions, the agreements about who's responsible for what and accountable for what, the agreements around what roles are. And the drivers around these agreements are our source of motivation to act and address a specific situation, understanding the conditions and the needs, and describe what's happening and what's needed. And more often than not, the response to a driver should be an experiment, and an experiment that evolves over time with us understanding and being really curious about what we're learning along the way. So what could it look like in your organization? This probably looks quite common. I mean, it's not unlike, although using different language, what we do in sprint planning, right? You have a product owner or a business having a tension that they need to resolve in terms of delivering some goodness to the customer. We identify what that is through the product owner and the collaboration with the business. We co-create the proposal or the proposition for what we're going to do and deliver. We agree and consent to what we're going to do, and we evolve our activities every sprint. I wonder what it could look like in your organization if you approached an agreement about anything, about how you might look at doing performance reviews next quarter. What it might look like if you as an organization decided to make an agreement that performance reviews would be done as a team instead of by a manager next quarter. With an agreement from the organization that will continue to evolve and iterate, and that it's just an experiment. And the way that we can do this quickly, easily, in an agile, responsive way is if we make the decision as an organization that the way that we organize are in circles or teams that operate on agreements and roles. What could that bring? What value could that bring to an organization if those accountabilities and that agency were held tightly within trusted circles of individuals who are committed to each other and committed to the organization and doing work that matters to them and delivering beautiful product for the customer? And being able to reflect this every day. Heartful participation. Is my behavior in this moment the greatest contribution I can make to the effectiveness of this collaboration? Wouldn't that be wonderful if that was the only question that we had to ask each other every day? Where we're choosing to participate. Only participating where we're choosing to, and that being okay. Having relationships with our colleagues in our organization that make us feel great about standing up for what brings us joy, where our gifts are, where we can best be in service. Because when we do that, we become accountable. When we exercise our agency, we become individuals that the others can count on and depend on because we're clear about what we're there for and what we're doing. So to learn more about Sociocracy 3, there's a great website again that has got all 63 patterns there. They do workshops and trainings all over the world. And again, there is a burgeoning community, a virtual community, that are committed to sharing experiments, helping one another to work through these, and seeing what works, and being okay if you fail. So we're about halfway through, which means for the rest of the hour, I have the privilege of sharing with you my lived experience in Enspiral. And I'm going to start this off by showing a quick little video, and then we'll get into it.
Enspiral began as a group of freelancers and activists in Wellington, New Zealand, who wanted to work collaboratively and have a positive social impact. So they started sharing resources and jobs.
A range of professionals, from computer programmers and designers to lawyers and accountants, have been drawn to this new way of working together.
The network continues to grow across New Zealand and around the world, collaborating online using digital tools and offline in a shared co-working space and at regular retreats.
Teams come together around inspiring ideas and launch social enterprises.
Enspiral Ventures contribute money, time, and skills as shared resources to the Enspiral Foundation.
Everyone decides how to spend the budget together through a process of collaborative funding, where anybody can propose projects.
People engage with Enspiral at different levels. Friends form the wider ecosystem of supporters.
Contributors participate in collective decision-making, propose projects for collaborative funding, and often work for Enspiral Ventures.
Foundation members steward the culture and social mission, and collectively own the foundation.
Enspiral creates innovative participatory tools and processes and open sources them.
It's all in service to the vision that began it all. More people working on stuff that matters.
Now, don't feel bad if you missed most of that. It's simple in its complexity, and I'll do my best to describe not only the structure, how we've got to where we are, the experiments that we've tried, areas we've failed in, and what the next steps might be. So Enspiral was started in 2011 by a very brilliant coder by the name of Joshua Weil, who was doing web development and his 20% time. And this is what 20% time means. He was working as hard as he could for 4 days a week and making enough money so that on the 5th day, his 20%, he could spend that working on projects that meant something to him. And through those projects, he started meeting other individuals who were kind of doing the same thing. And they came together and said, oh, there's a building on Allen Street that's going. Why don't we see if we can get a lease on it and put some desks in there and start to co-work? And this was about the time that I heard of Enspiral, because they were in the Wellington, in sort of the buzz around the Wellington community, that this was a co-working space with a difference, because it wasn't just IT freelancers getting together, sharing desks with their heads down and their headphones on coding. It was also other people that were attracted to this opportunity to do value share with people of a like mind. So lawyers and accountants and designers and facilitators and every type of freelancer that you can imagine started turning up at Allen Street. And what started happening was that conversations would be had over the water cooler, and later those conversations would spread to retreats as we started to organize to spend time away from the hustle and bustle of the city and go and spend quality time in the wilderness together. Companies started forming. So all of a sudden, these freelancers started finding value in one another, and with their entrepreneurial fires lit, started organizations, started companies. So today, Enspiral consists of about 15 independent companies, and these are everything from traditional development agencies to Loomio, who are a SaaS software product for decision making, to Action Station, which is New Zealand's biggest direct action organization, to Stuff, which is New Zealand's only independent press agency, to Lifehack, which is a collaboration with the New Zealand government to get better outcomes for mental health for at-risk youth, and on and on and on. But there's even normal ones like Enspiral Accounting and Enspiral Legal. So the structure of Enspiral is that in the center, there is the foundation, which is collectively owned by about 40 members. So 40 of us are all equal owners of Enspiral, but it's a non-financial share. So we'll never make heaps of money and run away. It's a voting share, it's a non-financial share. The next ring around is contributors. So contributors are the rest of the sort of 250 who are involved in all of our collaboration, decision making, and the way that we spend our money. And then hopefully I'll consider all of you on this call today to be friends. So you're the wider ecosystem of supporters and people who are interested in supporting this new opportunity for organizing networks. So how do people contribute? People contribute in many ways. So some people contribute financially, some people contribute with their time, but the key here, and again goes back to one of my principles, is that everything is voluntary. Some of the companies contribute a fixed amount every month. Some contribute a portion of their turnover or profit. Some don't contribute anything at all. Some contributors or members, contribute 20 or 30% of their earnings. Some contribute nothing beside their time. People contribute in many ways, and we value every type of contribution. And what we do as members is we steward the foundation as our commons. So the place where the agreements sit that bind us together as a collective. And I know that I'm hearing myself say this, and it's really difficult not being able to see your faces, to see if you are grasping the potential of this. As I mentioned Loomio, I'd love for all of you to look at Loomio. So Loomio is what we like to call the love child of the Occupy movement and technology. So I don't know if the Occupy movement made it to India, but in 2011, 2012, direct activists all over the world came together to make a statement about the extractive nature of our current system. I'm going to say it out loud. It's fine. But what they noticed was even people that were coming together for a very specific purpose, sitting around in a circle trying to make a decision was very difficult. And why is that? Because despite your best intention, a few people are going to have the loudest voices. A few people are going to have the most context. A few people are just going to be shy. And when we're trying to truly create an open participatory organization, everybody at least needs to have the opportunity to have their voice heard equally. So we started thinking about how we could use technology to do this, and the outcome of this is Loomio. So Loomio is used by over 100,000 organizations in the world, from the Podemos movement in Spain to the government of Taiwan, and so many in between. We even have just regular standard boards of directors using Loomio, because it's a way to have a discourse have a dialogue, have some divergence, come to convergence, make a proposal, and make a decision and have that decision recorded. Again, I really encourage you to go to the Loomio website and watch some of the videos, and just to see how simple but powerful it is. And the way that we are able in Enspiral to be a highly functioning, highly cohesive network of 250 distributed around the world is through using Loomio as a tool for our discourse and our decisions. We also spend our money together. And the way that this started was back in the early days of Enspiral, where there was just enough money to do the compliance stuff around having, filing the tax returns and doing what we needed to do to be an organization. And really wanting not to make any assumptions on what was important to the network to spend money on. So it started off as an Excel spreadsheet where anybody in the organization could raise a budget line in the spreadsheet. And a few people that were part of a financial working group would get together every month and decide which of these opportunities were the ones that either we had enough money to fund or that were going to be of most use to the network. And very quickly we found that that wasn't actually reflecting our values of open participation. And again, this is a real opportunity not to let a tool drive culture, but truly to let our culture create a tool. So let me just go to the next screen because you can sort of see here how CoBudget works. So in this example, it shows that there's $11,000 available to spend in the foundation currently, and I personally have $75 to spend. So where does that $75 I have to spend come from? So for every dollar I put into the commons, 50 cents goes to the foundation and 50 cents goes to my CoBudget account. So let's just say for argument's sake, this month I contributed $150 into Enspiral. 75 of that went to the foundation, and 75 of it are my available funds to spend on whichever of these opportunities I think I want to give money to. And you can see what I've given money to. So I gave $20 to somebody who raised a bucket to get some legal advice on the use of the phrase partners in some of our team activities. I funded $20 to a little micro business that my friend Dan wanted to start. I gave $20 to a proof of concept MVP for a volunteer impact program. And so you can see that this is sort of like an internal crowdfunding mechanic, but what it does is it allows for anybody in the community to request funding for something they think is going to benefit the community, but it has to be a good case, right? Otherwise you're not going to get funded. So that's how we do budgeting in Enspiral collaboratively. People ask me all the time, why doesn't this break? And that's not to say it doesn't break. It breaks sometimes, right? But it mostly breaks when the human connection breaks down. We organize our agreements, and our assumption is based on high trust. But we know that we can't actually do this stuff unless we actually take care of the humans and actively curate this. So our most recent agreement is something called the Stewardship Agreement. So we go away on retreat twice a year, once as a complete organization with our partners and our families and everything. And then in the winter, we go away on retreat to really dig into a particular topic. And this year we went away and talked about the concept of stewarding. The concept of stewarding is different from the concept of mentoring or coaching. It's really this gentle holding and looking after of something in a way that is totally in service. And we came away from that weekend with some proposals and ideas around how we could use intentional stewarding to make sure that people weren't falling through the cracks. Because as you can imagine, you know, Dunbar's number is a real thing. And as we're growing, we're 250 now, 230, 250 now. I don't have a one-on-one relationship with everybody in the network anymore. But what we've done in the first experiment around stewarding is in the member circle, we have passed an agreement. We have consent on an agreement, which means that every member has a steward and is a steward. So for example, you can see in this circle, if you come down here, you see me in the bottom, maybe at around 7 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock. So I am stewarded by Becca and I steward Hannah. Hannah stewards Billy and Billy stewards Chelsea. And this is a proactive intervention and experiment that we've put into place and agreed as a network to help to ensure that high trust and confidence in one another can be supported as we continue to grow. How we do leadership is really different as well. For a long time in Enspiral, even using the word leadership was, I don't want to say frowned upon, but almost something that we didn't want to name. So as you can imagine, in this organization where we are really valuing one another equally, to call somebody out as a leader can raise some tensions. But what was happening is that in that vacuum of naming leadership, these weird behaviors and anti-patterns were starting to develop. And what this looked like was the individuals who had the energy and got joy out of working on the network were doing an inordinate amount of work. They were doing this work in a way that was invisible. They were doing this work in a way that was burning them out. And when things happened, they were the ones that got blamed. So they were getting no support, getting the blame. And it was just clear that these individuals had the context simply because they were self-selecting in, but there was no mechanism or scaffold for anybody to be able to do that. And so 2 years ago, the first Catalyst experiment started, and this is the way that we do leadership in Enspiral. So currently, the cohort of Catalysts is 4. We're 4 individuals who have self-selected and self-funded into this role. We are the equivalent of 1 full-time employee. And we work to a strict 2-week sprint cycle. But we don't choose the work we do. So what you can see here, we use GitHub, we use a waffle board, like just an expanded Trello. So anybody in the network can put up an improvement, a card. Anybody in the network can tag it or pull it through. But what we do as the Catalysts every 2 weeks, every second Monday at our sprint planning, we pull the cards that we have the energy for and we think are most important to the network into our sprint. And then every other Friday, we do a live demo to the entire community. We live stream it on Zoom and we record it for YouTube. So we are actually in practice going through the entire Scrum methodology. The only thing that we're not doing quite right yet, that we haven't quite got yet, is in prioritizing, because we're doing that ourselves and we haven't figured out any good method of inquiry into the network to help us prioritize our tickets. So please, if anybody out there listening has a great solution or an experiment that we could try, which I would love to be able to bring to the group, an experiment, somebody from this webinar coming to us with an experiment around how we can do some prioritizing of our tickets in a way that reflects the entire organization. So this is, again, quite unique, and we are truly the servant leaders of the organization. We're growing, and this is really interesting. So, you know, we've got this vision to make the world a better place through giving anybody who wants to have meaning in their work a place to stand with other individuals. And for the most part, if you are not working in an Enspiral venture, you are a freelancer who doesn't want to be on your own, sees the value and gains energy from working with another group of professionals who are really truly at the super bleeding edge of experimenting with new ways of working. I've just recently come back from a workshop tour in Europe where we spoke to almost 500 individuals in about 12 different cities who are interested in learning from what we're doing. We're not about colonizing. I don't expect or even think there'll be other Inspirals anywhere else. But what I am hoping, and what I am hoping to leave you with, is the confidence to start to try some of these things. You'll definitely find you learn something, and you'll have an experience that you can share with your colleagues. So heaps of contacts and references. Reach out to me anytime. We communicate through Enspiral Tales. So there's about 20 of us that are actively blogging on our experience on our Medium channel, Enspiral Tales. Go to our handbook. So if you go to handbook.enspiral.com, that's an open source, free to use, free to fork resource that contains all of our agreements, all of the information that you need to know about how we organize. As I said, liberating structures and sociocracy, again, open source opportunities for you to start playing with, getting confidence that even organizations like Google know how important this is. And please do look up the work of my friend Bonnie Roy and your very own Yash Papers out of Faizabad, Uttar Pradesh, whose purpose is to rid India of styrofoam by the year 2025. And that feels to me like something that we should all get behind. So I just ticked over to exactly on the hour. Thank you. I've so enjoyed the privilege of speaking to you today. Go well, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Thanks very much. I look forward to hearing from you. See ya. Bye.